Uh, yeah, thanks, Patrick. So, um, this call is recorded. So if you, uh, so yeah, I hope you agree to that. If you don't, then I'm asked to take a pause and wait for a minute if someone wants to leave, and then we can continue. So the call will be once the recording is done, it gets recorded and it gets posted on YouTube. So hope that's okay with everyone. All right, let's get started. So the questions that we are going to discuss for today, they're posted in the call doc. So if you haven't signed up in the call doc, I'm going to quickly post the link to the call doc in the chat. And then if you navigate to the bottom of the call doc, there's some questions that uh, I'm hoping folks can share what some of the accomplishments and some of the lessons learned from last year that you would like to share. That's first. The first question is like, what are your units or institutes' most notable accomplishments related to the research computing and data space uh, in 2024? Potentially some of the lessons learned. Don't be shy. I think like
Well, I can make a comment. At the University of Florida, we've discovered that a lot more people are interested in AI related research, mixing it in with their classes for teaching, mixing it in with their research projects. It seems like it took a couple of years for everybody, the faculty in particular, to sort of learn and take some training materials and learn about it. And now they have all kinds of ideas popping up in their heads and they want to do things. So we definitely had a big uptick in activity and requests for support and consulting.
I believe that's been a common theme on our campus at Penn State as well. Uh, we have actually a pretty strong AI faculty group, AI-related researchers on campus, and they have been writing a lot of proposals in the AI field. So one of the challenges that we are looking at is if those things get funded, some of the infrastructure that we'll need to support, we don't have the kind of data center facilities that infrastructure would require. So we are kind of maybe hoping that those things get funded at a somewhere in between where we can support it and not all the things get funded. So that's a different challenge that we are facing at Penn State, and we need to hopefully we can tackle it in this year. Anyone else? Yeah, Matt, please.
Um, can folks hear me okay? I just want to double check.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, so I just moved back from the UK, so I can't say much with regards to my new location. But I can at least, uh, since talk about it is the AI issue um, is that uh, maybe this is further down. I have a personal frustration with it that I'm trying to get the words correct. There's no means for infrastructure staff or RCD folks to sort of push back against the constant demand for incoherent hardware and software needs for doing AI to thing. You have both researchers and students um, convinced by cloud vendor or commercial cloud vendors. Oh, yeah, here is X, Y, or Z readily available, and we as sort of research institutions don't have those sorts of things readily available, as you said. I mean, and is that partly just from my own research background, I find a lot of the AI to be a money sink and a waste of our resources. And just one of the internal frustrations of there's lots of other stuff that could be getting attention and funds, and uh, I see no clear way from a internal policy perspective to argue, please don't waste your time buying H100s to do LLMs on a generic data set. We have a lot of other things. So that's, I think, more of a 2025 frustration or challenge is finding and encouraging sort of ways to make sure that other segments of the ecosystem get appropriate funding so that we don't get sucked into a single money pit sort of situation.
So maybe no, that's a great point. Like trying to make sure that the researchers are matched with the appropriate resource is a great challenge. And maybe some other folks on the call can speak to that, how they are tackling that.
I put a link in the chat. This is Ken Taylor from the University of Illinois about our research computing environment at NCSA is available to anyone, nationwide. And the link points you to the Access program that allows you to apply for access to the resource. So there are ways to, approach GPU use without having to build your own. And this is freely available to everyone in research. So there's at least one alternative where you're not, building your own from scratch.
Yeah, at the University of Florida, we also have a policy where if somebody wants to buy something, then our purchasing department alerts IT, and I'm part of IT, and then we review their requests and we steer them to resources we already have rather than allowing them to buy all these different one-offs that don't work together or require special support and waste time. So that way it is more efficient, a little bit like what Ken is saying. There is a resource there and we steer people to use it.
So, no, that's great points there. I'm going to quickly point everyone to the call doc. We have 4 questions that we had listed out for in-call feedback survey. I I think the best way is like if you can just uh, take a few minutes and not maybe a minute to list out what top concerns of 2025 for you are. And if you see someone else typing in uh, that is like, what your concern is as well, you can just say a +1 next to that. That way, we can go back and potentially address or have that discussion at one of the calls in future. So if you could please take a minute and provide your feedback in the call doc. And if you're just joining the call, then let me post the call doc link so that you can sign in and see what your top concerns for 2025 in your RCD role. Then what is in your email inbox now that you need to address? What was the last presentation you listened to, and then some hot conference topics you want to address, like some conferences. In the meantime, like if you see any, yeah, so and actually, let me give people a minute to complete the response. All right, so I think thanks everyone. I mean, you can continue to jot down your thoughts and notes. I think going back to the questions, so the biggest challenge I feel like everyone is on everyone's mind right now is the federal funding uncertainty. And I, for one, have seen several emails come to us from our Vice President for Research. Some of them are actually talking about the uncertainty, some of them reassuring the researchers that uh, our research work is on the right track, and hopefully we can get those things moving forward. So focusing on the research bit is what the message is for us from Vice President for Research. So I don't know how other institutes are handling this uncertainty. Anyone?
We haven't heard any. We've gotten a generic email from the vice chancellor, but are currently sort of awaiting status. And since things are so dramatically in flux, at least our administration is not being forthcoming with information. I was just going to put in the chat, the CC Star program has its PI conference this week, and is that from what I heard from folks there, none of the NSF program managers showed up. So is that I think part of that of why folks are being, or administrations and whatnot are, because our funding agencies are themselves not communicating, and I presume internal staff are a bit unsure what the hell is going on as well. At least that's what I've gotten sort of secondhand.
Any other comments on the federal funding uncertainty? I mean, that's a challenge that we are going to face uh,
Yeah, for a
potentially for
couple
a
of months
long
for
time.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other challenges that people have mentioned are data center, power, space, cooling. Uh, so basically infrastructure related challenges, and that's a common trend that we are also seeing, especially when, as Matthew pointed out, we have a lot of researchers wanting to do AI research. They don't really know that they don't really need really powerful systems. If they're just doing inferencing, they can get by with a really low power unit GPU. So we have been trying to internally train our users so that we are not overwhelmed with what we have to put into our data center. But then our faculty, so they still write a lot of grants. They still go after the big infrastructure, and uh, so this is where we are trying to proactively ensure that we educate the users and make sure that the design of the systems is such that all the different use cases are addressed. Anyone else trying to
I think
tackle
that
these
even
issues?
if you can afford building out your data center, I think that which is mostly for most folks, it's completely unaffordable to support even GPU computing and buy H100s and H200s. The nodes themselves are too expensive for a condo model. for researchers. Data center power cooling consumption, I mean, like, besides not being climate friendly at all, which I think is really concerning to folks, I hope in our area, but that is something that's very serious to address. The cost of it, and then if you can afford it, the timeline to build out a data center right now is crazy. So moving into colo facilities and the uncertainty around going into colo facilities, that is something that I think it would be different for many of us who run our own data centers. And Northwestern right now, we are looking at both commercial and other academic partners to be able to tackle this challenge, because we were planning, I don't know about others, but we were planning to be able to be in our data center for at least another 5 years. And our cooling loop that we installed that took a year and a half longer than we had anticipated just because of post-COVID delays, that has really, we will outgrow it in probably a year and a half. And so and we are recruiting faculty, not only the people who are currently at Northwestern wanting to do AI, but faculty recruits coming in, right? So the the amount of compute that's being consumed, and then also data center storage, that's also taking up floor space. But really, it's the cooling loop. I think that is our greatest concern.
Actually, thanks for that comment, Jackie, and thanks for the other comment. Like, I should have asked. So, if anyone at any point feels like they want to make off the record comment, we can actually pause the Zoom recording, and we can have you present. So you don't have to feel that everything has to go on Zoom. We can always pause it. Sorry, on the YouTube, we can always pause the Zoom recording and continue. So if there are any such comments, especially with regards to some of the uncertainties that we are seeing, so just let me know and we can pause the Zoom recording. Thanks, Jackie.
I mean, do you want to pause it just to go back to the first?
Yeah, anyone want to make any comments? Like Patrick, maybe we can just pause this. All right, thanks, Patrick. So yeah, I mean the other as going down the list of questions, I think we've covered the lessons learned. I think trend-wise, I like the comment that future of DI is unknown. That's actually so true. We have invested so much in that space, and now it's unknown. So it's a trend that we need to adapt to, and we will see at least how we come out of it. The other challenges that folks have mentioned is, yeah, so the regulated data uh, projects is another challenge. And I know, Eric, you have always been warning the community that this is coming and everyone needs to be prepared for it. Most of us tried to, but not to the extent. And the speed at which these regulations are getting updated is something that is hard to keep up with. Like you set up one environment and then someone says, no, we need now you to start doing this in that for that particular data set. Like we had set up dbGaP data set as per the NIH guidelines, and now NIH said like, no, you have to start using 800 So that's something that we have to continuously adapt. So what are the other challenges that people are saying, like other than
Well,
uh,
one thing I'll just mention, it's one thing to build a system that can host the data. It's another and a whole different set of skills needed to migrate and work with researchers to use a different environment. Like if you ended up having that scenario where you're moving them from like the open science space to a restricted space, and the systems are different and the people maybe running them might be different or something, but like there's a whole bunch of work involved in migrating people, and they're not real happy about it because they're
Yeah,
having
and actually designing a secure system is sort of quite possible and feasible, but that doesn't mean that it actually supports the workflows that the users need. And that is a big thing that you also, if you ask the security architects to design a system, they can design a system, but they base that on sort of what are the basic needs of a typical enterprise computer environment, right? And then they can sort of say, well, it's workable as an enterprise computer. You can read your email, or you can do some spreadsheet editing or whatever. But then when you actually ask the researchers to do their work in that environment, all of a sudden you discover, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, because the kind of work they do is not enclosed in the typical portfolio of enterprise computing environments, right? So that's where the challenge, and it's very painful.
well, even if you're accustomed to setting like you could set up an HPC environment that's separate and do all that. The thing that gets challenging is you don't realize how much they use their local laptop and other code repositories and other things like that, like with VS Code and like there's this whole intermix that they're used to having things from their laptop seamlessly connect, coming back and forth in data and code flowing that you disrupt. And that's a hard thing to learn to manage all inside of your environment instead of them having this like kind of more fluid experience.
One of the downfalls that I have seen of more regulated data sets coming along is some of the faculty members are actually dropping the line of research altogether. Like one of the faculty
Yes.
members I talked with, he said, like, I'm just not going to touch that data set anymore. Like, I just don't want to deal with it, which is kind of unfortunate. That's not the consequence, or that's not what the people who put the restrictions in wanted, I believe. So, how are people tackling that?
It's true. And the only thing you can do is to try and help them as much as possible to support the workflows that they want to. But there are still people, and I've had some that basically say, I'm not doing this anymore. Forget it.
Yeah, it's a total cost benefit analysis. Like, is it worth the hassle for them? And is it worth it to the institution to support it for that research? If there's not enough volume of research like that, it might be very challenging. And I would also say there's kind of the opposite thing is the institution has to decide, is that researcher worth our risk? Because we
Hmm.
have researchers who do a good job of responsibility of their part, and we have researchers that don't and think, and so we've come to the point where we have a few researchers we would like to ban from using that kind of data because they're too risky as a like they don't, fulfill their end of the responsibility with their lab and stuff like that. So I think there's kind of two ends to it.
Yes. But it does cause significant stress on
Yeah,
all sides, like Scott is saying.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I wonder, like, I believe Dave is from National Labs, so I wonder if you're seeing similar things at the national labs.
You talking about me?
Yes, I think you're the
Oh, no,
only
no.
Dave on call.
I'm from the Jackson Laboratory.
Oh, okay. Yeah, slightly different. Still,
Yeah,
uh,
so I was just curious, what are the challenges that people are saying? Because we did an 800-171 assessment. We felt like we were in pretty good shape, and the things that we weren't meeting, the understanding was that as long as we have a plan to address it, that meets the spirit of the requirement.
I think one of the biggest challenges is a culture change, right? So there's a lot of labs that have a culture of security and working with government. And for folks who have universities that have stayed in fundamental research, this hasn't been something that was on the radar until recently. And so the lack of staff and lack of ownership of where this all belongs, is a big challenge. So,
So, like, is the concern is the concern that if the researcher, even if the researchers are given a compliant environment, that they'll move the data out of the environment? Yeah.
Yeah, because you cannot giving them just a compliant environment. It's not like we can come in and make sure that all the computers that you are currently using will now be made compliant. And in a university setting, that's impossible. So the only way we can
Yeah,
do it
sure.
is we build something new. And it's like saying, well, you've been working in this building all your life, but now you have to work in this other building. And then they say, well, but I was used to do this and I was used to do this and I would just do that. Just like Scott was saying, they can do some software development, they can pull in new Python resources when they're working, they can access GitLab and whatever. And now all of a sudden you have to put all of that inside this compliant environment that you built, and now they can't move out of it. And for an organization to create an environment that has all these features available relatively quickly is not trivial. This is something you're going to learn painfully. It's like, oh, this researcher wanted to do this, and we don't do that yet. Okay, we'll try to build it, and we'll have it in a couple of weeks or sometimes months, or it will require extra money, and it's just painful.
So, well, the other thing, I mean, oftentimes a lot of the researchers come from national labs, or so they know compliance better than the university itself. So for us, it's more of a like there hasn't been a traditional place for this all to be owned from an administrative level and culture. So we're used to dealing with student data, we're used to dealing with like FERPA and those kinds of things. But when it comes to these other what's kind, like the CMMC and like DoD and DOE type stuff, that's always been kind of housed at the national labs. And so these things now creeping onto campus, it's not a researcher culture. It's like a university thing for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, national labs also, or if you're working at a military base, the base security is much higher than a university. And so for them to say, well, now you have to do 171, they just look at their list of 150 controls and they say, oh, there are these 15 controls that we don't have. We add them and nobody sees it because there's the staff there to make sure that the lab is secure. And these people walk in their office and their computer is okay and their building network is okay and is all. Whereas at a university, that's not true. You have this new building, there's a network, and that computer is just relatively open. There are some security things that universities do, but it's not close to what 171 would be.
Yeah, how are you all assessing compliance? Are you sort of just folks responsible for the hardware looks over the list of controls and makes their own determination, or do you have
actually that
like
happens at
regulatory officers?
Yeah, that happens at some universities, and then you can see that some universities did that and they got in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, so the way that you have someone who signs the attestation, I guess, for DB-GAP, for example.
Right.
So somebody has to take responsibility for that.
Right.
And then the question is like, what is, I mean, I'd be interested to hear more about how they got
so at our university,
because
the vice president for research is the one who has to sign the attestation. And basically, he issued a policy and he said that if you sign this data use agreement, you are no longer allowed to sign it yourself. Somebody in my office has to sign it. And then when we sign it, we will tell you that you'd have to do it in this environment that I have secured with the help of IT. I mean, I got an agreement from the CIO that environment is secure. And in the past, you were allowed to do this on your desktops or a server in your lab, and you're no longer allowed to do that anymore, period.
Yeah, at Harvard,
that's a big change.
At Harvard, we had a policy that was written and improved in one day that came out of the VPR's office, which has never happened. Similar to what Eric just said, that like all documents that refer, like all system security plans, right, what you would normally turn in with like a NIST 800, either 53 or 171 reference, has to be signed off by the VPR as well as the CISO. It has to have both people's approval before, and if you do it without that, then like you're out of bounds, and there are major things that can happen to you as a faculty because we've had people who've done this wrong, and can create a huge like nightmare on compliance space. And then thus we also have built, in central IT some like systems to handle that data, but obviously there's some need to have um, those types of controls in just itself, depending on what they're doing research on. Like if the lab is like doing stuff with a chip maker or something like that, like they need their own setup, or they have specific data that's with their instrument that has that type of requirements with the OD or something. That's not a research computing type of thing. That's more of an in operational technology kind of space.
Yeah, but
So
those then are handled as an exception, right? So
yeah,
you have
yeah,
to
right.
you have to then prove it. You have to write your SSP. Somebody's going to review it, and then the CISO will sign off on it. You
Yeah.
can't just say, "I'm doing fine. Just believe me." It's like, nope, we don't believe you.
I would also recommend if you haven't gone through the process of building out a system like that, to definitely think about having a compliance consulting company help you architect and help you draft your first set of system security plan, because it'll be much more rigorous than follow like a FedRAMP template or something like that. And once you have a base of knowledge around that with your team and all that, I think you can maintain and update changes and all that pretty easily. But it's relatively challenging to take it on all by yourself. It would be nice. You'll survive an audit much
Yeah,
more cleanly. I'll put it that way. If you go that path.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I was just wondering what. So we have a CISO, and Jax is sort of small enough to where I worked with him on doing the assessment with folks on his team and so on. We did not pay an external consultant to look at it.
Mhm.
So that's the sort of thing that, I'm just wondering if that is a better approach, or as
Really
Well,
long
don't
it's the
know.
as
step.
the,
It's the
So I
next.
would just
It's sort
say,
of the next step in maturity you would want to do. At some point, you want to do it. Maybe not in the first couple of months or years, but at some point, you do want to have an external set of eyes because
yeah.
believe me, you and your techies, no matter how good they are, don't necessarily have the same way of reading this text and these controls as an auditor does.
Yeah, I worry about that too, because we had extended conversations about, for example, the encryption at rest requirement, which was sneakily changed in the middle of the year last year. I don't know if anyone caught that. But between revision 2 and revision 3, revision 2 said that physical controls would be sufficient in lieu of encryption at rest, like through self-encrypting drives, for example. And then revision 3 eliminated that language. And NIST called that the lowest level sort of minor change. So we didn't kind of catch it until late. And the question is, well, did they intend to remove physical security as an adequate compensating control? And if so, how could they consider that minor? Because I can tell you what we decided is we'll just have as part of our plan. Every time we buy new storage, it's going to be self-encrypting drive, which adds 15% or something like that to the cost of each purchase, maybe more, 20.
So it does
And I
look
have no
like
idea, like,
oh, go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say, it's tough to figure out what the answer is. If you can go on Google or ask any of your favorite AI tools out there, and you can get 10 different answers. So, um,
I think there's a great resource with the regulated research community of practice, RR Corp. Eric, I believe you're major
Mm-hmm.
part of that. So if you are facing some of those challenges, I would highly recommend that you attend some of those calls. They're very helpful. I've been part of that community as well. I think we are down to last 5 minutes. So one of the topics that someone listed was changing university leadership and potential impacts on RCD investments, and that's something that a lot of us are facing. And in order to further discuss that topic, we are planning to actually have a dedicated session on that later in the year. So I'm going to quickly go back to the slide deck that I had and share what the plan is for the rest of the year. So let's see if I can get the slideshow to show up. So yeah, we are the discussion. So what we had great discussion today. So we'll then talk about the data problem next month, uh, the CASC and CNI recap. So even if you are not able to go to the CASC, CNI meetings, or even the RDAP meeting, then that's what we discussed in the April call. In the May call, the plan is to talk about actually planning for resilience when there's changes at leadership level, then how people are planning for that. Then we have several open slots. So some of these open slots we plan to fill with the discussions that we had today, and it looks like we can potentially have uh, speakers from the RR Corp community come and talk with challenges that RCD leadership faces when it comes to security uh, and the regulated research in general. If there are any other topics that you want to suggest, uh, we are all ears. And if you're again interested in driving what we discuss on these calls, then please feel free to shoot me an email or to the anyone on the steering committee an email, and we'll be happy to get you onboarded with the steering committee. Uh, and then, so thanks. I think we're almost close to the end, so I'm going to give a stop here, and we can stop the recording.